2018 at 7:30 p.m. in the Aldermanic Chamber. The city clerk will offer the prayer, and Alderman Tenza will lead us in the pledge to the flag.
Almighty God, we have the high honor and serious duty to manage the affairs of our beloved city. Fill us, O God, with a spirit of unity and understanding, which enables us to face our multiple problems with a serene mind, with justice and charity for all, so that any and all decisions made by us will always be for the betterment and greater happiness of all our fellow citizens. So help us, God. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Would the clerk please call the roll?
Alderman O'Brien.
Present.
Alderman Gidge.
Present.
Alderman Harriet Gathright.
Present.
Alderman Dowd.
Present.
Alderman Clee.
Here.
Alderman Laws.
Here.
Alderman Lopez.
Here.
Alderman Karen. Here. Alderwoman Kelly.
Here.
Alderman Jettie.
Here.
Alderwoman Malizi Gola.
Present.
Alderman Tenza.
Present.
Alderman Schmidt. Alderman Wilshire.
Here.
We have 13 members present.
Thank you. Alderman Schmidt is unable to join us this evening. Also in attendance this evening is Mayor James Donchis and Corporation Counsel Steve Bolton. Would you care to address the board, Mayor?
Yes, Madam Chair, Madam President. I just wanted to mention a couple of items tonight. First on our agenda is the expansion of the proposed expansion of the elderly exemption. This is an outgrowth of the revaluation that was recently, the state-ordered revaluation that was recently done. As we know, the average home went up 23%, but the range of results across the residential sector among all the homeowners was very wide. Some went up only a little bit, some went up significantly more than 23%. And what that created was a situation in which some of our elderly residents, some of our senior citizens, have seen their taxes increase significantly because the amount of value above the exemption has expanded considerably. The way the exemption works is right now, if someone is 65 years of age and makes $50,000 or less, the first $155,000 of value for their home is exempted from taxes. In the age range of 75 to 79, $180,000 is exempted from taxes, and for anyone 80 years or older, $225,000 is exempted from taxes. Now, of course, our objective in creating this elderly exemption is to make it possible for senior citizens who have lived in our community, have worked here, and spent their lives here to stay here and stay in their homes without being forced out because of any property tax burden that they have to bear. In a high property tax state such as New Hampshire, though, this creates a dilemma in every community because for every dollar of tax relief which you give to the senior citizens, the rest of the taxpayers have to bear the burden. And so I've had put on your desk an analysis of all of the communities that we have in the state of, or a number of the communities, a number of the larger communities in the state of New Hampshire. And you will see that currently Nashua has the largest elderly exemption of any city in New Hampshire. Compare it to Manchester. Nashua is in the column third from the right. Compare it to Manchester. Instead of the 155 for the 65-year-old senior, they give 109. However, because of the revaluation, we are proposing to expand the elderly exemption, raise it by about the same amount as the average home went up in the revaluation, or about 25%. So and we're proposing to do this in a two-step approach. We would give the first part of the we'd raise it this year for this tax year, which means people wouldn't have to pay their full tax bill, or we would give a refund. and then we would raise it again next year. So the two raises together would equal 25%. So for someone in the 65-year-old age range, 65 to 75, the exemption would go from the 155 that we have now to 175 to 192 next year. For a person 75 to 79, it would go from 180 to 203 to 224. And for someone 80 years of age, it would go from 225 to 254 to 280. So a person who's 80 years old makes less than $50,000. If their home is worth assessed $280,000 or less, they would not pay any taxes at all. Currently, this amount, the tax relief we provide our seniors, costs about $3 million, a loss in revenue. This proposed expansion would move that to about $3.7 million. Now, the Budget Committee has recommended this, and I hope you'll follow the recommendation of the Budget Committee. I was asked a couple of questions about that I think I should answer now because they could come up again. First of all, why not do the entire raise this year? Well, the problem is the tax rate has been set, the budget has passed, and this was not in effect. So the taxes that we are collecting this year are not, the budget that and the tax rate that was established this year do not account for this. So in essence, we're really going to have to pay for whatever we do this year, next year. In other words, if we were to do the entire thing this year, it would cost us $700,000 this year, $700,000 next year, but all of that would have to be paid for next year, so it would raise taxes by $1.4 million. Now, we have young families, we have others that are struggling to pay taxes, so it seemed the most measured approach to do this in a two-step manner so that our seniors would get some relief this year, more relief next year, and we would be able then to account for it in next year's tax rate. So Alderman O'Brien and some others are sponsoring it. I think it's the way to go, and I hope you will pass it as it's proposed and as the Budget Committee endorsed it. On another subject, Madam Chair, the holiday stroll was this past weekend, Saturday night. Many of you were there. I thought it was, as usual, a really great event. It's a tremendous and wonderful opportunity for Nashwans of every neighborhood, of all ages, to get together and share downtown and share the feeling of community. We had thousands of people walking down Main Street carrying candles. Every year it's a very beautiful sight. I think it makes many people very happy, and therefore it's a great event. This was the 25th holiday stroll. Alan Minoyan, who was the one who conceived of this 25 years ago and who said he spoke on Saturday night, and who said that there were 600 people the first time. He was very glad, of course, to see all the progress, all the growth in this wonderful event. So, again, I just thank everybody for coming out. It was a great time, and I just, again, think it demonstrates just what a wonderful community we have. And that is all I have, Madam Chair.
Good. Responses to the remarks of the mayor. I'll start on this side. Alderman Lopez.
I just want to get my response done now so that we don't have to debate over it later. So I was the one who kind of took exception to not just providing the blind and elderly tax credit in one go. But in the context that the mayor put it tonight, it makes a lot more sense. When we were cutting the budget for, or reducing the budget for the city welfare, family assistance, I did not like that. But Alderman McCarthy and Alderman Dowd explained the concept of sticker shock. And what was going to happen when everybody saw their property revaluations, and why it was imperative that we keep our eyes on the impact to the overall taxpayer. So I understand what's being said here. I am most concerned about people on fixed incomes trying to hold on to their houses. But as the mayor has explained, that's not likely to affect that demographic. So I appreciate the explanation.
Further remarks, responses to the remarks of the mayor? Seeing none, recognition period.
First reading of Resolution 18-093 recognizes Alexis Durant for her dedication and volunteer work with the homeless.
There being no objection, I would like to suspend the rules to allow for a second reading of Resolution 1893.
Second reading of Resolution 18-093 recognizing Alexis Durant for her dedication and volunteer work with the homeless.
Alderman Lopez.
I'd like to make a motion for final passage of R18093.
Motion before us is to recommend final passage of Resolution 1893. Discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And that motion carries. Is Alexis Durant here in the audience this evening? Would you come forward? And Alderwoman Melissa Golia is going to come right up.
You have to stand in the middle so we're all looking at you.
The microphone.
Don't forget the microphone.
Oh, I thought you were saying they want to read it.
Hi, nice to meet you. So Alderman Lopez, is this on? Alderman Lopez has asked me to read the resolution. So it's Resolution 18093, recognizing Alexis Durant for her dedication and volunteer work with the homeless. City of Nashua, in the year 2018, whereas Alexis Durant became a dedicated volunteer at age 10 and is currently in her 8th year of volunteer work to help the homeless and less fortunate. Whereas Alexis began her volunteer career by helping at holiday fairs hosted by Life Care facilities. Alexis negotiated with the host of the holiday fairs so that she would receive a percentage of the profits that she then used to provide gift bags with toiletries and personal care items to the residents of the Maple Street shelter. Alexis was also able to purchase items that were donated to Harbor Homes to help mothers and their babies in transitional housing. Whereas Alexis continued her efforts by recruiting her cousins to help with the fairs and making items with her aunt to sell at the fairs, resulting in greater proceeds each year. Whereas Alexis wanted to do more, so once a month she and her family prepare a Sunday supper to bring to the shelter. This year, Alexis and her family hosted a jazz night at the Arbor Restaurant. Not only does Alexis continue to help the Maple Street shelter, she is working to provide special items to the group homes located on Chestnut and Winter Street. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Board of Aldermen of the City of Nashua that the Mayor and the Board of Aldermen of the City of Nashua sincerely appreciate and recognize the hard work and dedication of Alexis Durant in all her volunteer efforts. We thank her for setting a great example and inspiring others to help. Thank you.
Reading minutes of the previous meeting. There being no objection, I declare the minutes of the Board of Aldermen meeting of November 13, 2018 accepted, placed on file, and the reading suspended. Communications requiring only procedural actions and written reports from liaisons.
Communication from Dorothy Clark, Deputy Corporation Counsel, relative to proposed amendment to Resolution 18-073, legislation proposing a city charter amendment regarding the filing of elected vacancies.
There being no objection, I will accept the communication, place it on file, and refer it to the Personnel and Administrative Affairs Committee. Period for public comment relative to items expected to be acted upon this evening. No one has signed up. Communications requiring final approval.
Communication from Lori Wilshire, President, Board of Aldermen, relative to committee assignments.
Alderman O'Brien.
Thank you, Madam President. I would like to make a motion to accept, place on file, and approve the committee assignments as presented.
You've all heard the motion. Is there discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? And that motion carries.
Communication from Dim Johnson, Mayor, relative to contract for Board of Public Works Pension Administration.
Oh, I'm sorry. Alderman O'Brien.
Thank you, Madam President. I would like to make a motion to accept, place on file, and award a contract to Hooker and Holcomb in the amount of $49,000.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries.
Communication from Jim Donchis, Mayor, relative to the purchase replacement for a 2018 Ford Explorer Police Cruiser.
Alderwoman Kelly.
Thank you, Madam President. I'd like to make a motion to accept, place on file, and approve the use of SURF funds for the purchase of a replacement vehicle from MHQ Municipal Vehicles.
Is there discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. Petitions.
There are none.
Nominations, appointments, and elections.
There are none.
Reports of committees. There being no objection, I'll declare the report of the November 15, 2018 Finance Committee accepted and placed on file. There being no objection, I'll declare the report of the November 19, 2018 Special Personnel Administrative Affairs Committee accepted and placed on file. Confirmation of mayor's appointments.
There are none.
Unfinished business resolutions. There being no objection, I will remove Resolution 18073 from the table.
Third reading of Resolution 18-073, proposing amendment to the city charter relative to filling vacancies on elected boards by majority vote on the remaining members of that board.
Alderman Karen.
Yes, thank you, Madam President. I'd like to make a motion to re-refer R-18-073 to the Personnel Administrative Affairs Committee.
Is there discussion on that motion to re-refer? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that motion carries. Unfinished business ordinances.
Second reading of ordinance 18-029, increasing the exemption amount for the blind, elderly, and disabled tax exemptions by 25% total over the next 2 years.
Alderman O'Brien.
Yes, thank you, Madam President. I'd like to make an amendment to 018-029 in its entirety by replacing it with the proposed amendments recommended by the Personnel and Administrative Affairs Committee.
Heard the motion. Motion is to amend ordinance 1829 in its entirety by replacing it with the proposed amendments recommended by the Personnel Administrative Affairs Committee. Discussion on that. Alderman Dowd.
Yes, for the public, could we cover what was the changes?
I don't have the particular facts right in front of me, but
Alderman
from my,
O'Brien?
well, I can,
I can have the attorney describe it. if
oh,
you
the
prefer.
attorney, because I know it had to do with the changing to make it easier for the people in the office, so best way to explain it.
Actually, the amount of the exemption in each case has been rounded to the nearest thousand, essentially, so that it didn't come out a more difficult and less practical number when trying to explain. So everything ends in an even thousand instead of 683 or whatever it would be.
I ran into former Alderman Chassie at the stroll, and he wanted to ensure that we continue to do what he always proposed and explaining the changes to the public.
And you take that from Santa Claus? Alderman O'Brien.
Thank you, Madam President, and exactly what Corporate Counsel has said. In looking into this, the amendment was brought forward because when you're dealing with some of the elderly and you're dealing with numbers of 14,000, I mean, $1,582.67. It was just basically just rounded off, like Corporate Counsel said. It made it easy. Did nothing with the original proposal. We're still going to hit the 12.5 and the 12.5. It's a tiered effect thing, and we'll come to the 25%. which will help out our elderly. So I think it's better all the way around, and it's easier for the public to understand it. Thank you.
Motion is to amend. Further discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. Alderman O'Brien.
Thank you, Madam President. I'd like to move final passage of 018-029 as amended.
Motion before us is for final passage of is it ordinance 18029 as amended. Discussion on that motion. Alderman Jettie.
I would just like to clarify that for the elderly exemption, as the mayor explained, this is not for everybody, for all of the elderly. Besides reaching the age requirements, there are also income limitations, as the mayor mentioned, of $50,000 per person or per married couple, but also an asset limitation of $150,000, excluding the home that's being subject to the property tax. So it's not that all the elderly are going to be able to take advantage of this. It is restricted to people with those income limitations and asset limitations.
Thank you, Alderman Jettie. Further discussion, Alderman O'Brien.
Yes, to reaffirm what Alderman Jettie has said, it appears that the numbers that were brought before the committee is we're dealing with 600 residents. But keep in mind, these are 600 residents that really are in need, like I say, people who are blind or elderly and do not meet the criteria. And at $50,000, I think we can all agree that that qualifier is proper into that these people do need some attention, particularly with the state evaluation that was mandated upon us, that came upon us. This seems the fair way for the city to react. Thank you.
Further discussion? Motion before us is for final passage of ordinance 1829 as amended. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that motion carries. New business resolutions.
First reading of Resolution 18-094, approving the cost items of a collective bargaining agreement between the National Board of Education and the National Teachers Union, Local 1044, AFT, AFL-CIO, Unit C, Secretaries, from July 1, 2018 through June 30, 2020, and related transfers.
Further sponsors, Alderwoman Malizi Golia, Alderman Lopez, Alderwoman Kelly, Alderwoman Klee, Alderman Gidge, Alderman O'Brien, and myself. Given its first reading, oh, yeah, I'll sign it to the Budget Review Committee. Oh, there being no objection, sorry. Suspend the rules to allow for the first reading of a resolution that was received after the agenda was prepared.
First reading of Resolution 18-095, relative to the acceptance and appropriation of $119,100 from the Crest Foundation into Public Health and Community Services Grant Activity, Creating a Culture of Prevention.
Given its first reading, that will be assigned to the Human Affairs Committee. New business ordinances.
There are none.
Period for general public comment. First speaker to sign up is Fred Teboom.
Good evening. My name is Fred Teboom. I was at 24 Cheyenne Drive. I'm here to introduce Lynn Berry. You may have read the newspaper recently that had an article about Lynn Berry and a lead editorial about Lynn Berry. And I'd like to briefly mention her before I introduce her. Lynn Berry is 86 years old. Lynn has been a 63-year resident of Nashua. She's probably the feistiest 86-year-old that I've ever met. She has owned a business in Nashua for 25 years and paid taxes to the city all through that time. Well, Lynn Berry fell in some bad times, and she needed some help. She needed some help to repair a broken water pipe, hot water pipe in a mobile home. And she didn't have quite the cash to pay for that. She got some estimates. They came to about $100, $100 to $200. Basically, you needed like a shark bite coupler to insert into sections of the pipe. Because she didn't have the money, she contacted the city. The city put her in touch with the HUD program office. And now Miss Berry has an $1,100 mortgage on her home. That is not right. The system failed her. We failed her. We need a better system than what happened to Miss Berry. I'll let her tell her own story. She's perfectly capable of it. She'll be the next speaker, Mr. Chairman.
Lynn Berry? If you give your name and address for the record, please.
I'm coming.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I was very frustrated about this progress, and a lot of things that really infuriated me was that, number one, they didn't even use a Nashville or a New Hampshire contractor. They got a contractor from Worcester, Mass. I got quotes from people from. I live at Jensen's Park, and they have maintenance people there, and they came and they opened up the bottom of the mobile home so that it would be easily accessible. And then I had a plumber go in there and give me an estimate, and he said it'd be like between $150 and $200. So then when the city sent over this representative for HUD, he told me he wouldn't start the work until I signed this lien on my house, which upset me very highly. And so the gentleman came, and he spent a good 2 hours at my house. And I'm retired, so I know how long he stayed there. He wasn't there more than 2 hours. And he left. And he left it all open, so I thought he was coming back. I thought he wasn't finished. And I waited a day, 2 days, 3 days, and finally he didn't come back. And I called the gentleman at City Hall, and I said, "Is he finished?" And he said, "I think so." And I said, "Well, I think you better come look at this. It's all opened up to the weather." And he isn't finished. He didn't come back. So he said, "Well, let me look into it." The next thing I know, the day after that, the gentleman came back, and then he argued with me that he wasn't going to just close it up. He wasn't going to put insulation. That really set me off, because I said, you can't close it up in a mobile home and not put insulation. He said, "Well, it's not in the work order." I said, "Well, it should be." So he finally got him to put the insulation in and close it up. But that was after he came back a second time. And there I said, this is unbelievable. I can't believe the city of Nashua would have something like that for the elderly. I think it's a disgrace. Thank you.
Next speaker is Laurie Ortolano.
Good evening. Hi, 41 Berkeley Street. I wanted to share a little more information with you looking at some of the assessment data. We had the opportunity over the holiday weekend to get a hold of KRT's database in a form that we could actually look at and manipulate. And it would be my request to the aldermen that in the future, if we do, and when we do another assessment, that we look at the possibility of having that type of data that KRT provided in PDF form, which was basic and did not include a lot of the fields, be provided to the public in Excel or a readable form, so that we can, as the public, work with that data to kind of see what went on in our neighborhoods and get what we need to get. It would be so easy to put it out that way, and it does not have the level of data that the Nashua system would have in case we're concerned about manipulations or privacy, but it would make it so much easier for us to look at our neighborhoods and to make comparisons to streets and properties around Nashua. So, but in the process of really looking at the data, we started wondering why we didn't get a report from KRT. We paid them what seemed to be almost $500,000 to do an assessment for us, and next week I'll be going into City Hall under the RSA request that my attorney wrote to look into some of the documents that the city is putting together, and one of them was KRT correspondence. I don't know if there's a report from KRT that summarized how what they saw when they did their assessment or what the distribution was. We hear the mayor tell us tonight that the average increase was 23 or 24%. We came up with like 26 in our database. So, you know, you always worry when you transfer a database that you didn't get it all as clean as you want, or, you know, it's a lot of work to bring one in. And we had other residents in Nashua that worked on it and put it together. So it wasn't us doing it alone, but you know, it certainly would be nice if the professionals through KRT would give us that data clean, and we would be able to know for certain if we're correct. But we're in the right ballpark. It just seems we missed a great opportunity hiring a company and paying as much as we did if we did not get a report to look at what happened in our community when it came to assessing, where we hit these pitfalls, and take this data and have our assessing office use it to make improvements in the process by which they're assessing, because there's clearly room for improvements. I think when you look at the history of the last 10 years, we came out of 2008, which was a nightmare. That was had to be a nightmare for all assessing offices. The crash of the real estate market was tremendously difficult. And 2010, they did a reassessment. That was not an easy task. 2013, they did a reassessment. My observation of that, because it's on the data cards, is that we overcorrected heavily. I know in my neighborhood, they cut houses $100,000, which was some instances 25%. It was just so steep when the equalized ratio in 2010 was 1.1. So I noticed we went up streets and gave $30,000 discounts to every home, whether it was worth $200,000 or it was worth $300,000. It wasn't percentage based. It was just a single swoop cut. And I think that led to part of the problem in this assessment cycle. We found condo units that had been dropped from 120K to 70K in 2013 that are now up to 130K from KRT coming in 2018. So it was a total boomerang process for the people in those communities. And I think, you know, I am disappointed that the assessing office and our chair or our manager didn't say, hey, we need to get a report. You know, give us the distributions. Heck, that KRT database is listed by ward. Every alderman could have had a ward report, really simple to run, to know what happened in my ward, what was the increase, where are the problem areas, who might I be hearing from. How simple would that be? And then we would get to work in the communities and neighborhoods that are messed up, and we would be putting some extra focus time into those areas to correct it, because there's a lot of corrective work that needs to be done. I was out in my neighborhood today walking a dog and got stopped from two people from the other end that had gotten their tax bills, and one guy put the spreadsheet together. He knew I was the person being public, and he was like, oh my God, you know, what happened to my house? How did this happen? How did I go from the 300s to the upper 500s? What happened in a week when all this changed over? It's hard for people to understand. And then they say, well, I looked down the street and there's a whole bunch of houses in the 300s. Well, you know, we're all over the map over here. What happened? I know. Yes, I understand that. It's a problem. And it all has to do, I did meet with the Board of Assessors. It was a good meeting. You know, it has to do with how we capture our permits and how we handle our MLS data in between assessing cycles. It's abundantly clear to me that we do not value renovations and home improvements the way the sales market tells you we should value it. We're undervaluing grossly. I mean, it's ridiculous. And you know, all assessors will tell you, all good assessors will tell you, it's all about the sales data. This business is about the sales data, and that's why when we abate, we only allow people to come in working off of sales data. We don't allow them to use comps that are not sales-based because the sales data is the hard data. It makes perfect sense, I understand that. But the assessors should be operating on that sales data too. And every time they look at a property, they need to be asking themselves, what will this property bring in a market sale? What would it bring when they look at these improvements? And you know, I'm finding lots of permits for home renovations, major home renovations, that bring 10, 15, 20, 30K to the property when they assess it. And then when I look at the sales data and I looked at substantial homes that sold, when you look at a house that undergoes a home renovation, you're getting between, in neighborhoods all over Nashua, especially for the homes in the high 2s or 300 range. When they completely renovate that house, I could show you 10 sales that house popped 180 to 200 grand, 225. They're hot and they go. And there's a lot of data to support that. It's right in our neighborhood. And that's one of the reasons when I looked at your permit that I was concerned, Mr. Mayor, because it was so undervalued for the work done. And any other house, there's 3 or 4 houses right around your neighborhood that when they did that level of work, their homes sold for 150, 200,000 more. They really get that pop. And I feel that we're just not principled in the office down there, that we just don't have practices in place. I was very clear with the Board of Assessors that I felt policy needed to be created. You know, I told them that it says in the mission statement that their role is to review and make certain that the assessing office is compliant with their policies. Well, there appear to be none. So I encourage them to perhaps encourage the assessing office to create some. It just seems like there should be something down there. I know that legal counsel and members of City Hall, the mayor, very concerned about the time I'm wasting with staff, that I've overstayed my welcome. I have to tell you, it's enormously difficult for me to access this data. You know, the property cards you can't get on your computer at home. The database that's available in the house at your home is not a clean database, and it says right on the website that there are errors in this data, and basically you can't trust it. So I can't do it from home. When I go into the assessing office, I can use the computer, but it will not bring up the format of a property card. And I can't get the data that I need unless I print the card out. So I have to use some staff time. And I do it all myself, but then it goes to the printer and they have to charge me and they pay and sort them and count them and send me on my merry way. You know, I had asked the assessing office for help months ago in comping our house, and it was Steve Hamilton up at the DRA. I had 3 good conversations with him, and he gave me some questions that I should be able to ask my assessing office for help. They were not willing to answer those questions. Their immediate was, you know, they're not going to help me. And he said one of the things you could ask about was comps. If you're looking at your property and you're confused about, he knew the effect of your build was an issue for me. We talked about this. He said, ask for comps. I did. So did my my assessing chief at the Lakes region. She said to me, just ask for comps, ask for help, and ask them to give you comps. I asked John Duhamel for comps. Could you provide me with any comps or any policies to help me understand where my house EYB fell in my neighborhood? He never responded to the email. So the only way for me to understand that was to go to City Hall and print the 55 cards and pay for it. And what I learned is we were the only property that was changed aggressively when we were reassessed. And that was great data for me to have. We were right at the top of the list, you know? And you know, I wouldn't have been looking so much and so deeply into the data. I look back at the way all of this has transpired. If somebody had shown me some professional courtesy in that office and just helped me out, had a single meeting with me, got me some data, I wouldn't have been in there digging for every property card. You know, if the guy had come back and said, oh, you were the only house that was hit at this level, yep, okay, that may be a question, here, that's the data. I would have been at least happy to know that. And I wouldn't have had to spend time down there digging like I have dug. And that's the level we're at. You know, I want to tell you, I cannot emphasize enough how strongly I feel about professional courtesy in an office. You have one assessor down there who is so professional. Anytime I'm in that office and anyone walks in and he's around and he happens to have good visibility, he will say to anyone, is there anything I can help you with? Do you need anything? The women in the office are A1 professional. The chief, not cutting it. I have never seen a more unprofessional person in my life. I have had 2 conversations with him, and on the second conversation a couple weeks ago, only twice, so I've never had a meeting with this gentleman. The second conversation I had a couple weeks ago, he actually had his head facing a wall while I was talking to him. And right in front of his staff, I asked him if he could turn his head and look at me while I am speaking to him. To have to ask for that is absurd. It's absurd. And the issue of not really being at work really disturbs me. You have to take that job on full time. And it would take very little for this management team or the mayor's office or the CFO to go in there and do a quick audit on what is happening with attendance and get that information pretty quickly. Somebody has to care and look into it. But I think a lot of our problems occurred when I called him a year ago. He wasn't willing to meet. It was a very hostile conversation. I was wrong about everything. Permits are captured. Sales data is done. You're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. And that is what got me hopping, because I didn't feel I was wrong. It's just really disappointing. And with regard to our property card, I had another neighbor go in last week. I've had 2 now. They go to the professional assessor, the one I would recommend to anyone, and there's only one I will recommend that somebody go to in that office, only one. And they had a question on the land issue on the cards. There's a bunch of neighbors who are really concerned about land valuation and the factors on the property card, and I think there's a legitimate issue there. And one of my neighbors has been hot on it. He went in, he got the assessor to meet with him. The assessor could not answer his questions. The assessor said, I'll get back to you. The assessor called back 3 days later. He gave him an answer on the phone. My neighbor wasn't really satisfied with it, but was super appreciative that at least he got a response. That is more than we ever got in 4 years. And we happen to be with the assessor that doesn't do that, that didn't do it from the beginning. I think that difference in the assessors should not exist. You know, even 3 years ago, that should not have existed. I shouldn't have felt like I needed to get a lawyer to get RSA information. I didn't know how to word my questions to this administration without having a lawyer do it for me. I didn't know how to ask for a document because I've asked. I've asked for the qualifications of your assessors because the CFO has said they're all certified. I don't know if they are. We all hear stuff on people walking into a doctor who isn't a doctor. We all hear being duped because we're all told what the right answer is, but we don't really know. I said, well, when were they certified and what are they certified in? Who are they? No answer. Nobody knows. But they are. Just trust them, they are. And I want to point out one thing when it comes to assessing and assessing fairly. And I told this to the Board of Assessors. When I looked at our street on Berkeley Street, there was a lot of permits that were missed. But when I finally laid out all the permit data and I looked at, you know, what it showed, KRT came in and met with the Board of Assessors, and the board said to him, Rob Tozier, are all these problems caused by people not pulling permits and not, you know, and they're doing work to their homes and we don't know about it? And Rob said, you know, I don't know. I'm not certain. It could be the problem, right? How would he actually know? And in reality, when I went into the Board of Assessors, I said, let me tell you what I see. I see lots of permits being pulled, but I see the assessing people not going out to check on the permits or to close them with a visit. Tons. They're assessing at the desk off a picture. And on Berkeley Street, there were 16 out of 35 permits pulled that were never visited, looked at. And I'm talking significant valuations. They didn't go. And when in the process of not going, they missed full home renovations, major changes, because we know we cannot just trust what's written on the piece of paper with what's happening with the permit. So 16 out of 35 were just never visited or seen. And about 10 of those permits were simply not valued, forgotten to be valued for new kitchens and stuff. That's a lot. That's a lot of missed data that creates disproportionate assessments. It's very significant. You know, I was culling through the extra 100 permit cards I printed a week ago, and I'm going to tell you, I just scroll through them, and I create a spreadsheet, and I take a look, and I hit a permit card I hit a property card where there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 permits pulled. A lot done. 3 big ones, and the rest mechanical, electrical, plumbing. And I said, oh, this is a house that has a lot of work. It's in my neighborhood. And then I look at the activity section, and there hasn't been a measure and list since 1994, and they hadn't done a data verification since 1998, and there are absolutely no visits on this card. All of that work, and there isn't a visit out there, and the valuations are so flippin' low, it's crazy. A brand new kitchen in an old home yielded $1,500 on the assessment. And when I see a card like this, and this is a card that they don't go back to all the time, 3 big permits, no visits, no visits, no visits. You know what I do? I look at the name. I go, who is this? It's a Board of Assessors member. You know, do they understand how hard it is for us? That to me is a conflict, and I don't like seeing that. They don't understand on the outside what it's like for us. If you're not having anyone come to your property, or that assessing office isn't going to these properties to capture this stuff. You know, they're missing it on a big level. So it's really disappointing, and I'm going to continue to work at it. I don't really care if you stonewall, and I'm sure the city is going to provide nothing, and I'm not going to get any answers. And I'm going to go back to the questions I've asked, and I know I won't get answers, and over time I'm going to try and verify the data by going back down there and obtaining information. But the only reason I'm doing that is because the city won't give you any answers. And I'm not going to sit back and just accept that it got taken care of or somebody looked at it. I'm going to verify it, and I'm going to continue to verify it. And I do everything I can. I haven't spent much time in the assessing office this week. They have been mobbed with people coming in with issues. It's a zoo in there. And I have stayed out of there because I know what's going on with the tax bills. But when things calm down a little bit, I'll go back and do what I need to do. So, and I hope that you folks, as aldermen, can really get on board. I would love to see you take a vote of no confidence in that office. At least as a minimum, send a message that you got to clean it up and you got to care. It's really tough for us on the outside, and I just don't see anyone on the inside doing and making the right decisions. And when you talk about exemptions, let's talk about Concord Street. Let's talk about all the communities that give exemptions to historic homes. We never talk about that, and they do. And there's a street that is all over the map with properties that we largely know have so much trouble selling. And I feel very badly. I don't benefit with this tax credit. I don't live in the historic district. I'm not pushing this for me. But these folks who try to maintain those little mini museums down there have a brutal time trying to sell those houses and maintain them. And when I see assessing done on those houses that jacks it 100 or 150 or 200,000 above sale prices, I cringe. We should be very careful in that neighborhood on how we assess those homes. So anyway, thank you.
She referred to mine.
Mayor, would you like to address that?
I just wanted to correct any misimpression that may have been created with respect to the reference to my house, because I think there was the implication that somehow I had influenced this building permit. I think we took out and I actually brought my file. I'd never even looked at it until I knew Ms. Ortolano was investigating. We took out a building permit in maybe 2007, 2008. I was neither an alderman, nor in office, nor a mayor. And the permit said $100,000. Of course, I never even saw the paperwork at the time, because I wasn't that interested in how this would affect my assessment. And the project took a few years. The house is nearly 100 years old, so you have horsehair plaster, bathrooms are really small. We moved a door, stuff that didn't really affect value. There's a post and whatever it is, the old wiring system, a lot of that had to be replaced. Plumbing had to be replaced. The basement, some stuff had to be taken out of the basement. So the value went up $30,000. At the time, I didn't even look. Now and it was maybe 2011, 2012, or 10 or 11. Again, I wasn't even in office. The implication here, I think, is that somehow I influenced this as mayor. I was not mayor. I wasn't even an alderman. And I didn't even look at what the assessment was at all. I got the tax bill and I paid it. So the idea that somehow this was improper is completely a slander. And it's not an issue that I thought about. I paid the taxes. I never looked at the property card. Wasn't even aware of how this affected my value until this came up, and I looked back at the file. And because I knew this might come up, the last couple of meetings I've had my file. So next meeting, I will bring you my file, and you can look at it. It is totally an open book. This happened 10 years ago, and in sort of evaluating some of Ms. Ortolano's, I think certainly there have been mistakes made. A lot of this stuff is back in 2013. When you say that the condos went way down and then went way up, that's a two-sided problem. In the sense that, yeah, that sort of boomerang effect is a problem, but it meant that people paid lower taxes for 5 years. So if that had not happened, they would have paid more to the city. So a lot of these arguments are that individuals should be paying higher taxes. A building permit wasn't proper, enough value wasn't added. That means that some individual, some family, who probably thinks they're paying too much, the argument is they're not paying enough. I'm more concerned about the people whose values went up so much from, not on Berkeley Street like Ms. Ortolano's house where the taxes went down 20%. Those aren't the people that I'm worried about. It's the people who have owned $200,000 homes and their assessments went up 30 or 40%. Those are the people that I think we should be concerned about. And as you know, because I sent you the memo, I'll just make 2 more points. Because I sent you the memo, I asked John Griffin, CFO, and Kim Kleiner, Chief of Staff, to do a management audit and an efficiency audit of the assessing office. And I think you got that memo, right? But if you look carefully at the data, like this all began on Berkeley Street. If you look at specific houses and the specific factual statements that are made to support some of this, you will find that it's just riddled with errors. Take the Berkeley Street. That's where we started, Berkeley Street. The number 1 example says the assessment never went up in 8 years. You look at it, that's flat wrong. And if you go down one by one by one, a few of them are correct, but most of them are wrong. So, it's hard. I'm sure there are mistakes. A common mistake that's been made, misinterpretation, I'll call it, is that, well, in 2000, that around the revaluations, a around the revaluations of 13 and 18, that a building permit was not included in the value. Well, it wouldn't be, because it wouldn't kick in until the next April, because that's the way the thing works. And then the revaluation factors that in. So there's no change, but the revaluation takes it into effect. So I only get into this just because there was, I went on too long, I'm sure, but this sort of implication that there was some sort of improper conduct on my own house. I mean, this is, again, before I was an alderman, before I was mayor, just a private citizen, tried to fix up the house. The value went up $30,000. I figured that out in the last few weeks, just because I looked at the property card, looked at my file for the first time. So anyway, I think we will do the audit. We'll give you a report on the assessing office. We may recommend some changes, and I can tell you that they are making a serious effort to look at everything that's taking place, staffing, all the procedures, everything that's going on down there.
Remarks by members of the Board of Aldermen. I'll start on this side. Alderman O'Brien.
Thank you, Madam President. I would like just to reiterate what the mayor has said about the holiday stroll. I'd like to give my congratulations to Paul Shea, the Board of Directors of the American Downtown, his exhaustive staff, and I say that kind of tongue-in-cheek because I know, being on the former Board of Directors, just how much, but I'll tell you, I also like to thank all the merchants that pulled it all together and made a very successful, even though it was a 25-year celebration. It was very good. It's a great venue for the family to come out, and I took comfort in mentioning to Santa that I have been on my best behavior, so everything has been good. The other thing that really struck me tonight, what a breath of fresh air to see a young lady such as Alexis Durant to do the type of work that she has done. I don't think the little recognition that the mayor that you proposed, it was grand, it's the right thing to do, but probably not enough. And I'd like to see more of a challenge out there to other people of her age to come and step forward. I mean, if you want a quality city or you want any good program, you must be an active participant. So I encourage the young people to probably follow her lead and step forward in this. But it was really a breath of fresh air, and I thank her for it, and I congratulate her on getting that award. Thank you.
Alderman Dowd.
I too would like to thank Paul Shea and all those people that put effort into the downtown stroll. I talked to several of the business owners down there, and that's one of their biggest days of the year. And the more times that we can have the population in the downtown celebrating the downtown and taking part in these businesses, the better the city will be.
Alderman Clay.
Yes, I too attended the stroll, and it was incredible. And Paul Shea, as usual, I call him the ever-ready bunny. He was hopping around and doing all kinds of things. He was an incredible, incredible man. But I'd also like to take a few moments and thank Alderman Lopez and Amber Loge for their work that they've done on the Delaney House. Getting all of the decorations and creating that wonderful atmosphere for them. And thank you very much.
Alderman Lopez.
I was going to thank Alderman Clee for taking time to bring a bunch of trees that were donated, set them up with her husband, and then make sure that they were all properly cared for, placed. I mean, I thought that was a very nice thing to do, so I appreciated it. I also wanted to comment on Alexis' example. Proposing her recognition this week particularly, it was because we initiated it right after Alderman McCarthy's passing, and I know the board was feeling a sense of loss at the loss of a great leader. And I know in my work at, working with nonprofits, I mean, I get to see people struggling to put their lives together, but I also really get to see a lot of people showing leadership and making that happen. People who are organizing, their own massive undertakings that never see the light of day because, at the end of the day, it's what we need to keep moving, in nonprofits. So I just wanted to call attention to the fact that there's the higher level leadership that has the visibility of us as aldermen, where we get to sit here every other week and be on TV, for better or for worse, and be seen leading. But there's also every day a lot of people who are doing their thing every day to make life a little bit better for someone, to encourage other people to do that. And I wanted just to bring that to the board's attention. And then finally, I wanted to bring to the board's attention, there is a holiday fair at Palm Square, the Arbor Restaurant. It'll be this Saturday. I want to make sure I get the time right. And it will be from 12 p.m. to 6 p.m. So come by, celebrate the holiday spirit, and support a good cause.
I'll come back. Alderman Karen.
Yes, thank you. I too would like to congratulate you for honoring Alexa. It's important for our community, for our young people to get involved, and when you see that, I think it motivates everyone to get involved. So without them, we have nothing for our nonprofits and our agencies who are dealing with difficult situations. And on that note, the National Lions Club will be holding its annual Santa breakfast this Saturday from 8 to 11 at the National Senior Center. Santa will be there. The annual gingerbread contest will be held. I understand at this moment they have about 10 gingerbread houses, and if you haven't seen them, they're just magnificent. Also, there'll be a craft fair from 8 to noon. So come on down, have breakfast, see the crafts, see the gingerbread, and then go over to Palm Square.
It can
Thank
be Fair
you.
Day.
Huh?
Fair Day.
Right.
Alderman Kelly.
I feel that where I sit in the horseshoe, I end up just repeating what everybody said. But I did want to say that I ran into Paul during the holiday stroll, and he was in such good spirits, and he did such an incredible job. I know he took a couple days off, and he deserved that. So I really appreciated that. And I also had a comment about Alexis. It was just so inspiring to see someone find their passion and be so connected to it at such a young age. So thank you for doing that.
Alderman Jettie.
First, I would like to acknowledge the work that Ms. Ortolano is doing. Whether everything she says is correct or not, I think she's raising some important issues, and I'm glad to see that the mayor has initiated an audit of the assessor's office to try to answer her questions and the issues that she's raised. I think it's so important that all of the taxpayers in the city, whether they're elderly and no matter what ward they live in, I think it's important that people feel that they are being treated fairly, that their taxes are based on accurate information, and that there are not differences in how they're being taxed as opposed to other people. And I think that people expect and deserve a feeling that our tax process is fair. And I applaud the mayor for taking that step and looking into that. I would like to acknowledge a gift I received from Alderwoman Kelly. It's a bag. It says, "Plastic ain't fintastic," kind of acknowledging the damage that plastic is doing to our environment, and my meager efforts in trying to raise our awareness about that. And lastly, the Nashua Rotary Club is selling Christmas trees at the plaza that's out on Amherst Street near Pier 1 in front of Market Basket. The Demoulas family very generously has donated or allowed us to use that parking lot. And our trees are not plastic. They're real trees. And in fact, they are New Hampshire trees. So I encourage people to buy their trees from the Rotary Club. All profits go to local charities. And my wife and I will be selling trees there this Saturday morning. So please come on by and buy your tree there. Thank you.
Yes.
Alderwoman Melissa Galea.
Thank you. I would just like to join everyone in congratulating Paul Shea and the volunteers downtown and the Board of Directors of GAD. I too heard very positive things from the merchants as well as people just down enjoying the evening. And I think one of the things that is really nice to see is how many families are coming. Every year, it seems like there are more and more families, and I know some things are starting a little earlier. And I think that we are nicely growing the event for our families and the greater community. So thank you for all of your efforts. I would like to thank Alderman Lopez for bringing Alexis and all of her efforts to our attention and through the presentation tonight to the attention of the greater community. I think that adults and youth in the community should be inspired by her. And I also think we need to recognize her family and friends who have been supporting her. And I think it's important that as we look at young people in our community who are reaching out, that we acknowledge that they do have their family and friends with them. And just like each of us comes to this horseshoe with those who have supported us across the year, they're also growing leaders through their leadership. So hopefully they will expand the number of volunteers we have in our community. So thank you for bringing her to the community's acknowledgement, to our awareness. Two things. I got lots of phone calls because, oh my gosh, it's snowing and what's going to happen with my yard waste collection? It's going to December 7th, so you can still rake leaves as the snow melts. It will be picked up. The other thing is people have been contacting me because, as many of you know, drainage in my neighborhood is a problem. We have a small lake at the end of Timberline periodically. If you're out walking or driving and you see leaves in the storm drains, if you are so inclined to remove them, that would be very helpful as we continue to get rains and have water backing up throughout the neighborhood. And one final thing, NRPC has the draft of the 2019 to 2045, it says here, Nashua Area Metropolitan Transit Plan, and it's going up on the website, and it will be available for public comment, so for you to review and make public comment. It is up for 30 days and then will be discussed at NRPC. So if you would like to take a look at that, it's online for you to look at. Thank you.
Anyone else? I too would like to thank the Great American Downtown, Paul Shea, for all his efforts in putting on such a great event. 25 years, it's grown tremendously and is quite an event. People from out of town say, "Oh, did you go to Nashua to that stroll?" It was, it was a really good event, and so thank you to Paul Shea and the Great American Downtown. I'd also like to thank you, Alderman Lopez, for bringing Alexis Durant into us and recognizing her efforts. She started at such a young age, and it's so important to get young people involved.
I just want to point out, everyone's been thanking me, but she's been working for years, so all I did was nominate her.
Well, thank you. All right, Alderman Dowd.
Just real quickly, yesterday, the mayor, myself, Alderman Jetty, and Alderman Clee stood out in the rain and the snow and to watch the ribbon cutting for the connection of the Pennachuck in Nashua to the Pennachuck East Utility in Litchfield to provide, they've laid 5,600 feet of pipe under the river to provide clean drinking water to Litchfield and beyond because of the pollution over there with that they've been having. So it was quite of an event. Honorable Chuck Morris, the president of the Senate, was there, and like we must have had about 40 people in a 10 by 10 space under a tent. So, but it's a very interesting site. It's kind of hard to find, but it's going to provide a fantastic service for the community.
Alderman Clee.
Thank you. I just wanted to add one other thing. The trees that were donated to the Delaney House were donated from a very incredible man. He is the manager of the Home Depot exit 6, and he donated the 5 live trees personally, not from Home Depot, but he donated 5 live trees, not plastic, to the Delaney House, and I wanted to thank him for doing that.
Okay, committee announcements. Alderman O'Brien.
Yes, tomorrow night, November 28th at 7 p.m. here in the Automatic Chamber, we're going to have the Infrastructure Committee meeting. We'll be approving the preliminary design of the Greeley Park boat ramp.
Alderman Dowd.
Yes, this evening we had the first reading of the Secretary's contract with the school department, and I had to call a budget meeting on December 3rd because by legislation we have to handle contracts in a timely manner. So I'm going to have a meeting on December 3rd to discuss that one item. 6th, I'm being told by the
December
6th.
6th. Okay. Any other committee announcements? Alderman Karen.
Personnel will be meeting Monday, December 3rd at 6 p.m. And we have a lot of people coming in for appointments to various committees.
Alderwoman Malizia-Goya.
Yes, tomorrow night's evening was originally scheduled as a joint infrastructure PEDC meeting, and I know I will not be there because we have a meeting for the Joint Special School Committee, and I wasn't sure as to whether or not we would have a quorum. So in not wanting to have lack of quorum of one of the committees hold up that meeting was reposted this afternoon as being an infrastructure meeting. That being said, for members of PEDC who are planning on going, I would encourage you to go. It is certainly an infrastructure project, but it is also something I think is going to have an economic impact downtown and in the greater city. So to get an understanding of how that project is moving forward would probably be useful. And I know I will be watching that at that meeting at some point. So I would just encourage you to attend, even though it is no longer posted as a joint meeting. Thank you.
Alderman Dowd.
Yes, I'm glad that you pointed out tomorrow evening and Thursday evening, we'll be interviewing 5 companies for architectural design of the new middle school project. And last week, we as you all know, because we put out a memo, Harvey Construction was hired as a construction manager for that project and will be helping us moving forward. So, and then we're going to call yet another meeting after Thursday, probably sometime next week, if Ms. Lovering can find a date for me, to actually make the selection of the architectural company.
Okay. Do I have a motion? Alderman Lopez. The motion is to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And we are adjourned at 8:45.
Too slow there.